Hello and welcome to the course How to Beat Queen's Gambit with Semi-Slav Defense. And in this section we are going to analyze how to play against Catalan. What if in Queen's Gambit for some reason White decides to play g3, and this line is so popular nowadays so that you definitely should learn how to play against it, and especially how to get at least equal position against this opening. For example, when I recently played Blitz in one of the tournaments in Moscow, g3 and bishop g2 was played in every game against me, even if the first move was e4 or c4. Every time the bishop was on g2, because this is how White at least can get slight advantage. So the bishop puts more pressure on the diagonal, and White considers that his position is more comfortable. And then White plays and just waits for a mistake by Black. So that's the idea, to put the pressure on the center and on this diagonal. And some lines the c6 is hanging, or even the rook on e8. Of course, there are a lot of other options how to play against Catalan, but Semi-Slav is like one of the best ones. Okay, let's just warm up with a couple of puzzles before we start analyzing these main lines of this opening. Okay, first I want you to look at this position and try to find how to play here as White. So White to move, if you need, you may pause the video and may try to find the solution yourself. Okay, so this puzzle is not so difficult and I believe you solved it. The first move is rook g5. We sacrifice the exchange. If, for example, bishop takes g5, the king is too weak, so that here we take with the queen, and then checkmate. Doesn't matter where he goes. King f7 or king h8, we just play queen g7 with the checkmate. If, for example, something like knight g6 is played, we can just capture this knight, and then we are still able to checkmate. If, for example, in this position, after we take the pawn, he goes to the corner, to h8, how do we play? Here we may sacrifice the queen, because then that's a line mate. That's why the best move in this position is knight g6. By the way, did you notice here that our king is quite weak, but it's difficult to deliver any check to that king? Okay, knight g6. Here we take with the knight and we allow him to give this intermediate check. But after king f1, there are no more checks. These two squares are covered by our pieces. Now, if he takes, then queen g7, queen h6, that's a checkmate. So that the king can move to f7. However, after that, knight f8, king f8 and queen e8, for example. Then if he goes to f6, we can play, for example, knight h7, he goes to e5, but then queen e2, king d5, queen d3. How to play? If king e5, queen e3, king d5 again, but the queen is already here, that's why in this position we can just play rook 1 to g4, the f-pawn is pinned, and here we are quite close to a checkmate. We are threatening to play queen d3 and then rook e4 or queen e4. So maybe e5 can be played, but we can still checkmate. Queen d3. If bishop d4, then queen b3 checkmates. If king goes to e6, then just rook g6, king f7, queen takes on d6, and then we checkmate into moves like queen e6, like this, for example. Okay, fine, we are done with this puzzle, and I'm gonna show you another one which is really interesting. In this position, it's black to move. Black is playing without a queen, and his rook is hanging. And the task is to make a draw. How would you play if you were black? So the task is to make a draw by a perpetual check, or maybe just by a repetition of the position, or at least equalize the material. However, I believe if here white makes a mistake, he can even lose. How would you play? The first move here is d5, and then black can sacrifice the rook, because after king takes f3, knight d4 fork, then black wins the queen and he has extra piece. That's why c takes on d5, e takes on d5. If he doesn't take the rook, he has to take the pawn. That's the only move. But then bishop e6. If king e4 back, then bishop f5, winning the queen again. If king c6, then rook c8, still winning the queen. How to play? If king e6, then knight d4 fork. That's why he goes to d6. Then we play knight d4. This move is without a check. Queen g2. This is the most likely move for him. Then we play king f6, protecting the bishop so that we can continue checking with the knight. Rook e1, rook d8. He goes to c7. That's the only move. But then rook c3. If now he takes here, then rook c8 is a checkmate. If king b7, then just bishop d5, winning the queen. That's why king b6 is the only move. Then rook d6. How to play? If, for example, king a5, rook a3 checkmates. King b7, rook bishop d5 again. That's why king a7. If so, we can just repeat the position by checking him. And if he goes to a8, we just play bishop d5. If in this position, when our rook is hanging, we just move it to g7, threatening to play rook d8, checkmate. And here he has to give a check, queen f2, then knight f5, for example, and queen b2 or something like this. Where to move? If we don't want to close the 7th rank, we should keep our king here. But then he repeats the position with queen g2, and that's a draw. This is how white can save. Okay, fine. Let's go back to the main lines of how to play against Catalan. Okay, d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, e6. So this line is known as Semi-Slav defense, and in this position g3. Nowadays, this is one of the popular moves. However, I believe e3 and bishop g5 are more popular. Okay, g3. We can take on c4 immediately, but before I want you to play knight d7. There are three common moves. Maybe there are more moves, but we're gonna analyze these three as the most popular. Bishop g2, queen d3, and queen b3. So bishop g2 is the main line. That's why let's now analyze queen d3. If he plays this way, then it's recommended to play b6, with the idea to put some pressure on this queen. So he has to take on d5. C takes on d5. Bishop a4, a6 to prevent knight b5 move. Bishop g2, bishop b7. Castle, bishop e7. Knight d2, then just castle, the position is approximately equal. And if e4, it only opens our bishop. Actually, black has no problems in this position. Just activate the pieces, move the rook to the c file. Maybe b5 can be played, or knight a4 at some moment. The position for black is very solid. Moreover, this position will be analyzed in one of our games of this course. Okay, another secondary move is queen b3. Then just bishop e7. Bishop g2, castle, castle, and a5. So here the queen becomes the object of the attack. How to play? There are two moves that I met, knight d2 and rook d1. Let's say knight d2. If so, then a4. Queen c2 and b5. Then, for example, c5, e5, the position is equal. Then e3, queen c7, rook e8. So that's a complicated position where black can play on both sides, on the king side or on the queen side. If he gonna play on the king side, he should push the pawn. And if on the queen side, then the idea should be connected to the b5, b4. This maneuver. Also, in this position, we can just keep the tension but increase the pressure on the d4 pawn by playing, for example, knight f8, knight a6. So the position is so complicated and so many plans can be applied, but I just want you to know that black is already better. Maybe in this position e3 was a wrong move and white can find something better, but at least the position is playable for black. Okay. If, for example, c takes on b5 or on d5, then we just take with the c pawn. And unfortunately for white, he can't capture here because of queen b6 attacking the knight and the pawn on d4. Knight retreats, queen d4. We take the central pawn. And here we are slightly better. If, for example, for some reason he decides to go to c7, then after rook a7 the knight is trapped. So queen b3 doesn't really bring any advantage for white, and there are no problems for black. But please try to at least remember this line with a5, a4. If, for example, then rook d1, then you can still play a4, and in this position he can't capture on e4, because then d takes on c4. If now queen takes on c4, then b5, queen c6, rook a4. This is how he loses a piece. That's why queen c2 should be played. However, then d takes on c4, knight a4, b5, knight goes back, and queen b6. That's a typical position. We develop the bishop to b7, then try to play knight d5, and maybe later c5 at some moment. Here the position is equal. Okay, fine. Now let's analyze the main move, which is bishop g2. Knight d7, bishop g2. How to play here? Of course, we may play bishop e7, and if he castles, only then we capture on c4. And then we get the position that we are going to analyze in the main variation. So, but we can play d takes c4 after knight d7 was just played. Then e4 can be played, or he can just castle. Well, let's first analyze e4. Then b5, e5, knight d5. In this position, the strongest continuation for white is to play knight g5. He is down a pawn, he should somehow attack. That's why knight g5, bishop e7, queen h5, g6 should be played. Queen h6, he wants to get to g7. That's why bishop goes back. Queen h3 now. Knight 7 to b6, castle, bishop e7 again. If now he decides to play queen h6 back, then bishop f8, we just repeat the position, and it can be a draw. If knight c to e4, then just h6. The knight retreats, and we still want to apply this plan, king f8, king g7. Even after knight f3, we play king f8, because if bishop h6 now, after king g8, it's difficult to get rid of this pin. Okay, so that was e4 move. But the main move is to castle. Bishop e7. For example, in this position, instead of bishop e7, we may also play b5, but I recommend bishop e7. However, you should know what to do. If you play b5, maybe you can come to this position with a different move order. Then queen c2, bishop e7. a4, b4. The idea of queen c2 is also to move the knight to e4. Knight takes on e4, queen takes on e4. The pawn on c6 is hanging. That's why bishop b7. Knight f5. Here we take on e5. Pawn takes, and then we just castle. However, he can capture on c4, but after queen c7 the position is equal. If you play c5, we can just trade the light squared bishops, and there will be no problems for black. However, bishop e7, that's the main move. And in this position, a4 can be played, or e4. Actually, it doesn't matter because both these lines lead to a well-known position. Let's say, for example, e4. Then you castle. If now a4, then we play e5 and come to the main position that we already know. But if, for example, after e4 he plays bishop f4, then I want you to remember that you should play knight h5 and attack this bishop. The bishop retreats, you play knight f3. The bishop retreats, you play knight f6, with the idea to play knight g4 and attack the bishop again. So usually h3 is played here, but then b5, and you are fine with extra pawn. If, for example, a4, then you play knight g4, bishop f4, e5, and then again we get the same position that we are going to analyze later, and that happened in the game between Saran and Andreev. If, for example, instead of playing bishop e4, e5 is played, knight goes to d5, knight e4, h6, because we don't want him to trade our dark squared bishop and then gets to d6. a4, b6. That's a very important move, because then the bishop can go to a6. For example, knight f to d2, bishop a6. Queen c2, then c5 or knight b4, and here black is better. Okay. a4. This is how it was played in the game between Saran and Andreev. Castle and e4. I want you to remember this position. When you see that he plays e4 and you can play b5, you should meet him with e5 move. How to play? D takes on e5, that's the main move in this position. If knight takes, that will be a real mistake, because then after knight g4, black has the counterplay and the initiative. If, for example, f4, then after queen b6 and knight f2, he even loses the exchange. So everyone who plays this, almost everyone who plays this position, knows that d takes on e5 should be played. Knight g4, bishop f4 protecting the pawn, and queen a5 adding one more attacker. How to play in this position? Of course, here white can try queen d4 to get another attacker, but then rook d8, and now we are threatening to play knight e5. On the next move, doesn't matter how white can play, because the rook on d8 is protected enough, so something like rook f to d1 doesn't because on the next move we are going to play knight to e5, and rook on d8 is protected enough. If, for example, rook a2 d1, we still play knight e5. There is a bishop and the queen on e5. Queen d4 is actually a mistake in this position. So queen a5, the main move in this position is e6. F takes on e6. And in this position, Sarana applied a novelty. He played bishop h3. We will analyze this game in the next lecture. For some reason, Alexei Dreyev made a mistake. However, the best move here is queen h5. And then knight g5, for example. Queen h5 attacks the bishop. So knight g5, knight d to f6, protecting the pawn and the knight. e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes. No. First, it's better for white to trade the queens. Then bishop takes e5, bishop g5. Knight e4, bishop e7. This position is considered to be equal. Here, black is 2 pawns up, but unfortunately he loses the one on c4. And this is how white can also get the compensation for one pawn because of his piece's activity. However, instead of bishop h3, queen e2 is the main move, with the idea to support the pawn and to attack on c4. And then there are two moves that can be played. It's knight g or knight d to e5. And I recommend knight d to e5. Knight d e5, and if now he plays knight d2, then queen c5, protecting the pawn. h3, g5. The bishop takes on e5, otherwise we take the bishop. Knight takes e5. King h2, for example. Bishop d7. And after knight d1, we can play b5 and successfully play this position with the extra pawn. If we play knight g5, if we play knight g5 and he doesn't take but play knight d4, it's still fine, then just knight b6. If he takes on e5 with the bishop, we take with the queen. Bishop h3, then just knight d3. Another possible move that actually happened in the game between Topalov and Kasparov was e5 here. Knight d to e5. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, queen h5. That was the idea of this pawn sacrifice, to pin the knight. And in that game it was played bishop d6. Knight e4, rook f5. Queen e8. If bishop f8, then knight d6, and black loses. That's why rook f8, and after queen h5, we just repeat the position and agree to a draw. If we don't want to get a draw, instead of bishop d6, we may play rook f5 immediately. Queen e8 and bishop f8 in this position. There is no knight on e4, that's why there is no threat with knight d6. Bishop e4 attacking our rook, then knight f7. We sacrifice the exchange, and this position is unclear. So we sacrifice the exchange, but we are 2 pawns up. That's a kind of a compensation. If you want to play for a victory, you may play this position. Okay, fine. Looks like we analyzed all the lines, So fine, looks like we analyzed all popular lines of how to play against Catalan with Semi-Slav. If you meet something different, at least you can use the ideas that you learn from this opening. At least you may use the ideas that you learn from this lecture. Thank you for your attention. In the next lectures, we'll analyze the games played by grandmasters so that you can not only learn the move order, but the ideas and the plan.